Thank you everyone for joining us for this session. Thank you for being a part of this People Matters Talent Tech virtual Evolve virtual conference throughout the day. I'm sure you're enjoying it so far. We do have a lot of excitement planned for you for the rest of the day as well. And we're here with the next session in the conference, which is on Masterclass on defining the HR technology roadmap. This research-based session will focus on knowing more about how organizations are transforming their HR technology plans from current state to future state while reevaluating their service delivery and implementation models. And all this within continuous alignment of HR strategy and business strategy. And to present this session, we have someone who has woken up at 4 a.m. in the morning to take this session. Please join me in welcoming Brian Sommer, founder TechVentive. Brian leads a number of strategy and marketing consulting projects at leading high-tech firms. For over 30 years, Brian has been advising the world's largest firms on strategy, change, process, and technology initiatives. Brian assisted over 100 of the Fortune 500 on financial software selections and continues to advise a wide array of high technology firms globally. Welcome, Brian. Thank you for joining us today this early in the morning. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me here. Well, hello, everyone. And as I was telling the show folks, in the background is actually the Bellagio Hotel. I'm doing this call from Las Vegas, Nevada, so it's a very different kind of place to be. All right, well, let's get right to it. I'm going to talk for the next few minutes on the HR technology roadmap. And it's a really interesting kind of time to have this sort of discussion because so many technology products out there are in the middle of some sort of transition. And I'll talk a lot about that right now. What that means is that if you hear code words in your company like we want to go through a digital transformation, or we want to modernize HR, or in some places we want to have the factory of the future, there's a really interesting thing going on where companies want this incredible new digital capability, but it isn't necessarily going to be there for some of the products you're going to choose. So your job is to choose well and to figure out whether what you're looking at is a all new product designed for the digital age, or is it some older industrial age product that's being reskinned to try and look a little bit more relevant today. Let's get right into it. Well, and of course, that's who I am. And yes, I rattle a lot on the software space. Here are the main things I want to cover today. How the organizations are transforming their HR world. And I think that part alone will be worth the attendance. I'm going to talk about a number of things related to some of the integration challenges that I run into repeatedly at HR clients globally. We need to talk about what the kind of service delivery and implementation kind of problems are going to be encountered as we move to a new generation of technology. And finally, hit on some of the new mechanisms that are going to ensure that your firm and your HR organization strategy remain aligned. To put this in context, let's just go back just 25 years ago and briefly, let's just point out what wasn't there in the last 25 years. There was no eBay, Amazon, Alibaba, no Google, amazing enough, no 4G LTE. In fact, 2G wasn't even available until 1991. There was no social sentiment data, no LinkedIn, no Facebook, none of that stuff. There was no iPod. There was no SQL and all the open source technology. There wasn't Hadoop, and I could go on and on. The reason I tell you this is many of these things only came into existence and only flourished because of a confluence of a number of new technologies over the last few decades. But some of the most incredible involved the lifting of constraints on technology that I'll get into in just a second. Anyway, the bottom line on all this is that what happened 25 years ago is that technology was far more limited, very underpowered, and most of the technology that companies, including HR departments, used was limited to the four walls of an enterprise. My apologies, folks. Apparently, we're getting some background noise there. All right. So if you want to make a more digital HR kind of world, what are the prerequisites for that? And the first one is going to be that you're going to be taking advantage of a different kind of technology today. It is unconstrained. It is scalable. But to really make great use of this stuff, you've got to do a lot of cleanup of some of your old core technology that you use currently. Uh, we, there are also some massive data sets that you're going to have to apply in some of the new analytics. And you see that all the time in how companies want to apply like attrition, retention kind of smart analytic applications in the HR space. But trust me, there's a pile more going on out there, particularly in areas like in smart recruiting. There's a vendor called HireView that's really interesting to look at because in just a simple 10-minute video interview, they collect 25,000 markers about an individual based on the way that they are answering questions, the speed with which they answer them, the vocabulary that they use, and on and on and on. It's and all this is powered by some incredible in-memory technology and artificial or machine learning type intelligence. Anyway, I can go on and on, including I'll touch on even things like robotic process automation and some of the other new technology out there today. To give you an idea, and this won't probably translate well because it's in US dollars, but I cut this ad out of a newspaper back in May of 2016. And at that time, they were selling a 5 terabyte hard drive, not megabyte, not gigabyte, but 5 terabyte hard drive for 99 US dollars. And then just a few months ago, they actually reduced the price this down to $87. And I'm showing you this because if any of you still remember the day where people used to talk about, well, we can't pay a supplier until the Saturday evening AP check batch processing window. Those days are going away, and they're going away because technology just doesn't get constrained the way it used to. Memory is no longer an issue. It's no longer expensive. Throughput is amazing now. Disk storage is not an issue. It's cheap as can be, and on and on and on. What used to constrain the way we used to think about how we would use technology is gone. So with that comes a whole new age and a whole new set of capabilities. What you'll see in the new technology is a number of unconstrained things popping up, and the symptoms, if you will, are things like you don't see subledgers anymore when you're using an in-memory database. You have the ability through ubiquitous internet access to make any place, any location, anywhere in the world a virtual work location for all of your staff. The high-speed telecommunications that even make this phone call possible are another aspect of this, and why we have to rethink the way we look at this technology is very different. The problem, though, for a lot of organizations is that their thinking isn't as advanced and as powerful as the technology that's out there. And one of the biggest concerns I have is that for a lot of clients, they have no idea what's been going on because too many of their staff have been heads down working in the weeds on their job and their role, and they haven't been paying attention to what's been changing in the HR technology world out there. It gets really difficult to imagine what the art of the possible is if you are not very cosmopolitan. And that word means to be aware of one's environment. And today, the need to be aware is really quite critical. The integration problem, though, that I run into at clients is horrendous. When I look, the typical large enterprise of a large company will have over 100 integrations connecting to its HRMS system. That's a lot of connection points. A recent study I saw just about 3 weeks ago showed that the average HR system has 137 cloud connections being used by employees to go in and out of HR data or to connect to HR data. And that could be something as simple as like a LinkedIn or Facebook to quite a bit of other kind of rogue technologies connecting in. And what you get out of this is you get an environment that the British have a phrase called a dog's breakfast. It's not the most appetizing thing in the world. And what you have is a dog's breakfast of all kinds of different systems that are from different companies that are patched together with all kinds of different integrations, interfaces, manual extracts with manual uploads, spreadsheet inputs, and so forth, just all over the place. It's a mess. And guess what? Also, it is. It's not scalable. I have had two clients in the last 2 years that have deferred on doing major acquisitions simply because they can't scale their technology. This environment gets worse. The dog's breakfast gets worse when you see that you have a different set of solutions at your headquarters and maybe different ones still at every plant, division, facility, whatever that you have. When you have that much systems diversity, you're almost guaranteed you're going to have a problem with growing and scaling your firm. But you also have something that shows that you have a very out of date and obsolete HR technology environment. I'm not suggesting that best of breed is a bad strategy, but I tell you what, folks, you need to get as much as you possibly can at a core level, and then you add some of the enabling capabilities on the periphery. But having all of this stuff is a problem, and here's why. When you look at now some of the new technologies like all these things in orange are new big data stores from external data stores and big data, dark data, and so forth. This is what companies want to connect to their HR systems. The problem is, if you're trying to connect all this like geospatial or how about corporate credit card data, this is how a lot of companies find out if there's been quite a bit of fraud in the travel and expense reporting, which, by the way, about five less than 5% of the employees generate almost all of the T&E fraud out there. And in some companies, it could be as much as 7% of T&E transactions are fraudulent. But if you wanted to use that stuff and compare it to other HR data, it's hard to do it when your stuff is such a, like I said before, a dog's breakfast in the past. This is why, with all this new stuff coming on board, this is why cleaning up the old HR infrastructure is so important today. These integrations, though, are problematic for companies because very few HR departments actually have enough people to do anything about all the integration that's coming up and more to come. I do know of HR departments that have acquired their own integration team within HR, the function HR, which is equal parts innovative and sad at the same time because they need to find ways to simultaneously like cut down the ones on some of the tactical kinds of HR functions and capabilities so that they can support integrations of some of the newer, cooler stuff, if you will, in the big data area, big data, machine learning, all that kind of stuff. The other thing I think is important to note is that with the newer HR cloud solutions, many of these are on a 2, 3, or 4 times per year refresh cycle or upgrade cycle from the vendors. And every time there's a new major upgrade, that presents possibilities for breaking of key integrations. One of the points I bring up with vendors repeatedly, and they chafe when I do it, is are you going to stand behind all the integrations with your integration partners so that my client, a customer of theirs, if you will, is not going to be inconvenienced when integrations break because of a patch or an upgrade that went through. This is going to be a real testing point because as we get to ever more and more smaller services, microservices from a variety of different third-party providers connecting in with core HR, someone's got to maintain all those integration points. Someone has to sandbox and pre-test them all. And the question is it going to be you, your HR organization, your IT organization, or can you get a vendor who will step up and do it for you? What this leads up to is that many companies want to have a single data model, a single platform. They want, and I know Workday uses this expression, the rule of one or the power of one. And that's because it cuts down on, if anything, it just cuts down on the number of integrations that have to be supported. So the business problem that I know a lot of executives will surface in this kind of a conversation is, who do we shoot when all this stuff goes haywire? And it's a great question to keep at the top of mind. What's also changing as we're losing the constraints on HR technology is that all the old transaction data in ERP systems or HR systems, that used to be the entire universe of what HR used. That's not true anymore. That was internal transaction data. Now the new HR systems are, people want to include sensor data, IoT data, big data, social sentiment data, weather data, and a whole bunch of other data stores. And they want to use that to do any number of things. Some folks retailers are using weather information, seasonal retailing, operational data, and other things to do their labor scheduling for their retail stores. That's not an inconsequential amount of information, but what's even more impressive is they run these scenarios multiple times every day so that they can tell a worker with as little as 2 hours advance notice whether to come in or not for a given shift. This kind of power is only possible when the constraints in technology have been lifted, but it's also the power that fuels pattern recognition. It is behind the powerful algorithms and that machine learning tools are utilizing. And all this is being driven to create new insights, new opportunities for corporations and their workers all over the world. To give you an example of how things are changing, we need to look at how processes are evolving in the HR world. And what I've done is shown on the left a very traditional linear workflow of how recruiting used to work. And this particular flow is instructive because we had to do things in a very measured, sequential way because of limitations the way technology worked years ago. In the new world, you've got companies like Connect 6 and Tello that are drawing on massive databases in memory at the levels of, say, about over 1 billion personal profiles of people on the planet Earth in their systems. From those, we can now capture and create these massive um, data stores to find potential job seekers, job applicants, or passive or active. And that's where the search begins. And because these technologies use in-memory databases, they can find in 4 milliseconds a number of qualified job candidates that a normal recruiter using traditional methods might have taken weeks or months to locate. They also are able to use this stuff, and Intello does this to find out, if you will, when's the best time to approach you about a new opportunity. If they find out that by triangulating you with your significant other on social media and everything else, they might notice that, oh, well, your significant other has just accepted a job opportunity in another state or province. Maybe now you're open to a job move as well. There's a lot going on in recruitment marketing that's very different from the way recruitment used to work. And it's this new process begins with big data. It begins with in-memory technology, and it drives a very different, not only kind of result, but it makes you even think about, do I really still need an applicant tracking system? And do we really want to ever need to use things like job boards and one ads anymore? There's a new world out there, and it's changing so many processes, not just even in HR. I see it in supply chain and other places where many processes today start with big data. Another example I like to show you involves campus recruiting. And in my day, if you go up to the 12 o'clock kind of view, where the HR system was the center of the universe, and everything that evolved around it involved a lot of either paper or interaction between people, interviewers, candidates, and the HR system. It was a very manual process, and when you were a student, you went on campus, you had to wait for someone at the campus office to put a sign-up sheet that said you were eligible to interview with a company. Today, it doesn't work that way at all. I found this was rather fascinating. I'm old enough now to have had two kids graduate college. And when my son was coming out, I did a number of interviews with campus recruiting organizations to find out how it works today. And I guessed that I told this um, recruiting office person, I go, so now that all the students have smartphones and tablets, everything's very digital. I guess all you do is just send an email or text blast out to students to let them know that an employer's coming to campus. And she goes, yes. I go, and I guess because it's all digital and real time that the sign up sheet fills up in milliseconds now, not days like it used to when I went to school. She goes, no, it takes students between 48 and 72 hours to complete the work, to fill in and sign up for the list. I go, why does it take so long? And she said, the first thing that people do is they go, and this is at 12 o'clock, students will go out to Facebook, Google, and other places. And what they're trying to find out is what can they learn about this prospective employer, and they'll look at things like Vault and Glassdoor for ratings on that employer and so forth. And if they think this is a potential employer that they might be interested in interviewing, then they go to consult with their tribe, their people. They'll go to Facebook and other social media sites to check in with their fellow students to find out what they think about this employer. And only after they've vetted out the employer do they then reconnect back with the organization to say, yes, I'll sign up and be willing to be interviewed. The interview doesn't happen on campus as much anymore. A lot of folks use video interviewing technology like a HireVue. And interesting enough, even when they're taking the interview, they're live tweeting, live streaming the entire interview process over the internet. They're either periscoping it or they're typing in and text messaging all your interview questions. They're even giving other future interviewees tips and tricks on how to pass your screen interviews as well. Employers, though, haven't gotten quite as sophisticated as they need to. I did show that in the dead center is a very small little ERP HR system. And I did that by design because if you think that HR is still the center of technology when it comes to people, you are so wrong. There are so many new technologies out there that are empowering job seekers, job candidates, passive job seekers, and so forth. They have a lot of extra new capability in their hands, and they're doing and communicating things about your firm that your HR department probably doesn't know about and doesn't monitor because it's still trying to use just its core HR technology that dated back to the 1980s, and that's just not going to cut it anymore. I'm not going to go through and drain this entire slide, but suffice to say, there are massive data stores out there that job seekers are relying on, and that gives them additional insight, power, and leverage in the marketplace today. I can do this same kind of process review that looks more closely at what are the other constituents in our processes have to draw upon to find powerful information in creating a more digital look into your firm. And I get the same kind of result in many different areas of business. You, on the other hand, you have a responsibility to become more aware of what's going on and to see what a process looks like from the other side. How does it look like from a regulator, from a job seeker, from so forth, and you'll find that you don't need one new recruiting workflow or process. You probably need dozens of them for the different kinds of workers and for the different kinds of technologies that each one is bringing into the mix. You're going to need a new group of skills within HR, and you probably should have already started hiring them. People with great digital age skills, knowledge of big data sets and everything else. And some of you are going to complain, whoa, 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 Brian, we can't add headcount to HR. And I would argue that is correct. In a lot of companies, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take a lot of the tedious stuff out and replace um, or manual effort out, and it needs to be replaced with fully automated integrated systems so that you can free up people's time to work on the things that are really going to matter. things like who's going to manage the chat bots and the content that they rely on, who's going to possess all these great digital age skills and algorithms, and who will understand the machine learning black boxes that are coming with the new software. These are the kinds of skills you're going to have. And the question is, where are you going to get them, and how do you groom the future leaders of your HR organization if you don't start developing and building that pipeline within HR itself? For the firm, you're going to need lots of skills in areas like algorithms, statistics, social sciences, data visualization, and so forth. This is all part of the new kit, if you will, for what is it going to take to build a successful HR organization. Algorithms are particularly problematic, and don't be surprised that every time a vendor shows up with a great machine learning algorithm, you need to ask them a couple of questions. And one is it opaque or transparent? And if it's opaque, that means they're controlling the contents of the black box. And I would be very concerned anytime a vendor wants you to just trust them that their opaque black box is actually relevant and appropriate for your firm. Because should your firm get sued because of the actions of an algorithm, you may have to defend that in a court of law. And if you don't know what's inside it, you can't control it, you can't edit it, you have a risk exposure on your side. There are a lot of areas, though, where we're seeing the new kind of technology. I mentioned chatbots. Chatbots are being used by a lot of organizations just to take a lot of the mundane calls that employees have to HR off the table. And you don't need someone in HR to always answer the question, how do I enroll for benefits? Or I forgot what to do when I have a new dependent in my family. That should all be automated through chatbots, workflow, and other technology. The AI tools, the best of these are more than a simple question and response. They do things like anticipate the next 2 or 3 kinds of follow-on questions you might have and preemptively going ahead and volunteering that information. They also assess whether those responses are good news or bad news to you. And based on that, they're recommending some highly specialized additional options for you that have workflow already built in so that you can, that a person can go from asking a question to actually solving their problem in just one additional step. That's it. That's really cool. I'm not that thrilled about some of the demos I see where someone uses like an Alexa speaker thing and you just ask it a question and it gives you a response and that's it. All that is natural language processing. It understood your question and it went back to a server and served up that answer. That's it. That's not really, while that's cute and interesting, that's not really where things need to go. It needs to do all these things at the bottom of the slide about anticipating what your next questions were going to be, recommending follow-up actions, and have the workflow and other capabilities behind the scenes ready to go to actually make it a reality. Anything that you can imagine that could be done in a repeatable, predictable fashion is going to be a candidate for robotic process automation. HR is full of those kind of areas as well. This is going to hit an HR department near you, and you need to be prepared for this. This change is coming, and you need to probably reskill yourself to become prepared to deal with all the other things like machine learning and algorithms and so forth, because that's going to be behind the heart and soul of a lot of the new functions and process designs powering HR. So if I were to bucket out the HR solutions in use today, we've got 3 main categories. In the bottom left, I have this thing called traditional plus. These are very traditional kinds of HR solutions. The processes work the same way they have the last 30 years, and they're not delivering a whole lot of value. Yes, they may have a new UX on them to make them look more like a digital age product, but it's still the same old stuff with the same data model and all that. Maybe they now have an in-memory database underneath it all, but it's still the same old stuff. There's another group that right above them that are fad or hyperbolic in some of their claims. And a lot, I put a lot of the solutions I see in the engagement area, the culture area, and even a lot of the analytics are in this space. Are they totally proven out? No. Are they scientifically valid? I don't know. The studies aren't in yet. And there is some risk associated with all of those. In fact, I would tell you that the reason I have their value in the low category right now is because we don't know whether they really work or not. And they're all kind of on a case by case basis from vendor to vendor. The newer solutions, the ones in green on the far right, they're the ones right now that seem to possess the highest value. And these are the ones where you have net new solutions designed by vendors. They use a combination of non-HR and HR data to bring rich kind of solutions available and opportunities for the users. And their processes often start with big data in mind. The processes also look at a number of new constituents that are serving these people as well. And you see some powerful applications of this capability in areas like learning, recruiting, and even some cases performance evaluations. As I come to close here, I do want to tell you this. You need to be very clear where you are on a journey to transform your HR organization. And many clients I get to, believe it or not, are borderline between functional and dysfunctional. If they do another acquisition, their whole HR function will collapse. And I tell you this because if you don't know where you're at, and your board is bothering your organization or bugging you to transform or to become a digital maven, whatever, you can't do that if you're down at the bottom of this pyramid. You've got a lot of work to do. You've got to become solid and functional before you can become process excellent and so forth. If you try and make major leaps from one stage to the next, you're going to probably fail. And that is just hubris, thinking that you can move that far that fast. And what I see happening are companies trying, to move from dysfunctional to functional. They just need to survive. If you want to go from functional to process excellent, you're trying to reduce your operating cost and improve the productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness of your functions. To become an industry leader, you're looking to capture competitive advantage. And if you're trying to do something transformational, you're trying to change the game. If you can't hardly get your payroll out correct, it doesn't do you any good to start thinking about game changing, because you've got a lot of other work in between there, dysfunctional and game changing to knock out. And the way I know that where you're at is I look at what kind of technologies you're using. And if you're still using, look at the stuff for dysfunctional, lots of Excel spreadsheets. You got a bunch of out-of-date on-premise software. You're still running on a relational database. You have to create a data warehouse to hold a lot of finance and HR data. And your people still can't agree between finance, HR, and operations how many employees we have in this company. I know you're down at the bottom of the stack. So you can dream all you want about transforming in a digital future. You're just not really there yet. To create this digital future, and I think this is my last slide, I want you to think about the data, the tools, and the staff that can use all this new kind of information to create a different kind of value proposition. And you can see the examples: salary data, health data, dark data, and so forth. You want to be able to harness all this digital exhaust that's coming off of your employees' smartphones, their ID badges, and so forth. And you want to be able to utilize things like analytics, visualization, other tools. All of that put together, and with all the frequent new upgrades coming out with these new technologies, it's going to create an incredible vortex of change within your HR organization. And your challenge is to figure out, how do you harness all that for maximum advantage for your firm? What you need to do, and I hope you got this out of a call, is I want you to start by thinking, are you doing enough to see the opportunities that are out there today? Just the fact that you took the time to listen to somebody like me who's talking to you at 4 a.m. here in Las Vegas says you're willing to be cosmopolitan, to see the possibilities that are out there. Then you have to think about, well, now that I know them, how would I redo my processes and the like to take advantage of it? The next step is to reconcile the 2B world that's out there against where you're at really today. And then finally, you can get on with whatever kind of transformation journey is appropriate for your firm. That's it for me today. I hope some of this was at least entertaining, if not terribly useful for you. So I'm going to turn back over to Megan. Megan, what do we want to talk about next?
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm sure this is super useful for our audience. Thank you. We have a lot of questions coming in, Brian, and we do have about 3 to 4 minutes left in the session. So let's see how many we can take right now.
Okay.
So I'm going to pick up one question, which is really around the HR technology roadmap. So the attendee has not shared the name. The question is very simple. What should be the expected outcome of an HR technology roadmap?
Okay. At a minimum, I think you need to design. It starts, I think, with a design of what the new processes are going to look like, with a focus on not just the internal constituents within HR, but the internal constituents across the company, all the employees, as well as all the external ones, the job seekers, whether those are people who haven't even thought about working for your firm yet, that you're going to need to cultivate all the way through those who would go through the pipeline. So the process flows would be one major thing. The second would be a listing of what the new technology components might be. And you would want to know, like, what do I need at an architectural level, technology wise? Like, we're looking for things that use in memory technology, not relational databases, and so forth. And then you need to have, you want to also have a functional view, which is what are going to be some of the technology providers that are going to bring some of this new capability in there. And trust me, there's going to be a lot of new names that are not familiar to a lot of executives. Not that there's anything wrong with companies like SAP and Oracle. Those are all brand names that we all know, but you're probably going to see a whole bunch of new ones that are providing everything from machine learning tools to radical new ways of parsing out prospect information and the like. The last thing I would tell you is an integration plan, which is how you're going to tie together all this information from all these new data sources and all these new technologies. And how do you keep this very fragile environment working well? The last real major component is the people side of it. What is the HR team going to look like, and what's the impact going to be on the organization? And you need to think about this, because it will make you think about, what is our employment brand going to be like? What is our recruiting brand going to be like? How are we going to, how do we interact with people in not just a very human way, but in a very human, high touch way, yet still provide an incredible amount of capability with some very empowering new technologies. What else you got?
Interesting. Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to pick up one more question, Brian. So that question is coming from Shalini. That's a different aspect to this question. Till now, we've been talking a lot about the hard technology aspect. Shalini says that the biggest challenge on HR tech upskilling and integration is unlearning of traditional HR practices.
Yep.
So how has been your experience, Brian, in your conversations of helping leaders move up that curve and leave those traditional HR practices and look at HR technology from a fresh perspective?
Okay. I think if you think that you can magically, like, snap your fingers and you're going to change people's perceptions or thinking around HR technology, in one briefing and one meeting or whatever, it's not going to happen. I think probably one of the most powerful things that HR groups could do is to invite in one or two new bleeding edge, cutting edge kind of technology vendors, either on site or for a webinar in their offices. Like every Friday for an hour, you bring a new vendor in that shows, if you will, the art of the possible, because that starts to showcase to people, here are things that we found that we're looking at that we might have a role for them in this organization. And it starts to get people thinking differently about the way things work. Change doesn't come easily or at all for some people. I remember in a child rearing book I read eons ago, and it talked about how little children become very much creatures of habit. And if you're the parent that always takes them on Saturday morning to a soccer game, um, they get real upset when the parents switch jobs and responsibilities. And it's like, no, 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 mom's the one who always takes me to soccer. And they get real upset about it. And that's because little children crave constancy and hate change. And what have I learned in all my years in business is that workers, employees, your colleagues are nothing more than older children. They crave constancy and they hate change. That's one of the biggest problems right now in a lot of organizations, is that some people are very comfortable with their old HR technology because it's like an old broken in pair of shoes. It's very familiar and they don't have to think about it. And that is a very problematic state. Making people become more cosmopolitan really helps. And I would encourage you to come up with a policy that lets them get out of the office for a few hours every month, whatever, to go to a show, go to a vendor office or whatever, to go see things differently. I actually, believe it or not, and I have this luxury because I'm here in, I work a lot out in Silicon Valley, but I will take executive teams from the top. I mean, chief operating officers, CEOs, CFOs, and the like. I bring them with me to Silicon Valley, and I'll spend maybe 2.5 days taking them all around, seeing 3, maybe 4 vendors in a single day, to get them to start seeing how different the world can be. And every time this happens, I get a lot of executives telling me that I don't have time. We all can't take that much time away, to be gone for 2 days from the office. And yet, when we're all piling back into the van to go back to the airport, it's a fascinating kind of thing, because they all sit there and go like, wow, I didn't realize that no one's, for example, I had a chief operating officer of a giant railroad company. I asked everyone in the van, what did you think? And he goes, you know what? I learned that in the last 10 years, no one in Silicon Valley has been building anything on premises. And this guy doesn't know anything about the cloud. And yet he figured that out on his own. And to realize that everything has been, cloud driven for 10 years was kind of an eye opener to him. And he goes, and when we get back to Chicago, if anybody comes into my office and wants to build or buy anything on premises, we're going to have an uncomfortable conversation. And, so getting people out of the office, getting them out of their comfort zone, getting them in front of some new and different stuff is the job at hand, in getting people to realize what the new roadmap is going to be all about.
Fantastic. Excellent, Brian. Thank you so much. We still have questions coming in, but we are 5 minutes already over the session time. And I'm conscious about your time. You've taken the time this early in the morning, so we will have to stop here. But what I will do is, Brian, I'll send the questions that we've received via email to you. And if you have some time in your day-to-day, if you could respond to them, that will be awesome.
Oh yeah, I got time between let's see, it's 5:15 now. Yeah, I'll knock it out, in the next 30 minutes here. And I'm just kidding, folks. All right. Thanks for having me. And I know I overstayed my time, but thank you everyone for listening in, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Brian. It was a pleasure listening to you. I'm sure none of us felt it went overboard, but thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you, all of you, for joining this session and being as enthusiastic as ever. And before we close this session, let me share the secret code for this session for the leaderboard contest. The code is #HRTech6. I will just spell it out so that you get it correctly. It is HRTECH 6 numerals. So that's #HRTech6 for you. So go get it, log in the leaderboard, put in your code and get your points. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.
All righty. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.